Welcome to our In Conversation With, where today we'll be exploring the world of mobile app development and a couple of very different agency models. Today, we're joined by Rob Sandbach, Managing Director of Indiespring, and Anthony Main, founder of The Distance. Both companies are mobile app development agencies, but Indiespring focus primarily on Brownfield projects, and The Distance focus almost exclusively on Greenfield projects. Today, we'll be exploring why their businesses focus on the areas they do and what differentiates them, as well as giving the speakers an opportunity to speak about their businesses and why they do what they do in more general terms.
Great. Welcome to this podcast. I'm Rob Sandbach from Indiespring, and I'm joined by Anthony Main.
Morning.
Hi. Yeah, great to have you. Thanks very much. Anthony, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and The Distance?
Sure. Okay. Well, thanks for having us, Rob. It's great to share all the stuff we do. As you say, my name's Anthony Main. I'm the founder of The Distance. We're a digital agency that specialises in mobile app development, just like yourselves. But as we know, the slight difference between us is we focus on Greenfield app projects with a bit more design, development, creative side of the solution. Whereas, am I right? You guys are mainly focused on the Brownfield side of it.
That's it. Yeah, we've come from far more of an engineering background. I think primarily because I myself was a developer. So our core skill set's more in I guess the harder development side of things, and so we've just naturally gravitated over time towards those sort of brownfield projects.
Yeah, it's interesting. That's the same background I'd have. Growing up, my mum and dad were in the IT world, so my mum used to code games out of library books.
Brilliant.
Because we had PCs and not consoles and things like that. So I got a love for games or computers from a very early age. But yeah, I cut my teeth as a developer, and we started in the same way that you guys have carried on, but as the business has changed, we've grown more in the discovery, design aspects of app development, which is, it's a different challenge to the development ones that you guys probably have.
Yeah. And has that come from other business partners who've brought the design angle in, or have you yourself got more interested in that?
I guess it's probably from the customer demand, and then seeing that side of the process. We've slowly changed our process to be more oriented around supporting those customers all the way along that journey, and that's sort of where our mission statement stands about being a partner to support our customers on that ever-changing and evolving digital landscape. So we have process purely around helping our customers get like their Apple account set up and making the decisions about which platforms to focus on and how to architect the back-end integrations and what systems we should be using and stuff. So yeah, very much design from every aspect, from technical design right through to the creative, where we then focus on the other end and accessibility and inclusiveness to give our customers hopefully the best decision-making criteria as they go through. So it makes it very diverse type of work, and we probably don't face the same sort of technical challenges that some of you guys and some of the projects you've got to take on. Or where do you feel that your strengths are?
Yeah, I think, we naturally have to do a bit of the design work, but as I intimated earlier, the bulk of our challenges lie normally in the adoption of legacy systems that, for whatever reason, have been a bit abandoned or unloved, and so need bringing up to date, or it's a system which is being built as a new project, but is often being deployed within an organization. And so, of course, you need to, still embrace elements of good design and usability, absolutely. But the big advantage of those sort of applications is that you have a known user base of X employees. You can take the time to train them formally. So all of the criteria around onboarding and the App Store optimization, that side of it is less of a requirement. The requirements of the business and the product move towards usability in its purest sense. Speed of response. How quickly can I get through my tasks? I'm using this app for 5 hours a day, every day of my life. I don't need it to be full of flourishes and beautifully engaging. I just need it to work. And it's a different challenge, but it's still design, isn't it?
100%.
Tend to think of design as looking beautiful, but it's
design
far more
from
than
a
that.
UX perspective is just as important.
Yeah.
So with that wide breadth of projects you take on? You must have quite a broad technical team with quite a lot of diverse skills.
Yeah, that's one of the challenges we have, definitely, is not picking one sort of technological horse and backing it. We're generally sort of .NET back end on. We've got two sides to our business, but to keep it simple, we'll stick to one. But generally .NET back end, and so some of our clients are very much in the Microsoft wheelhouse. They want .NET
Big
top to bottom.
enterprise,
Yeah, exactly. So they're looking for a Xamarin or Maui as the front end, which is absolutely fit for purpose for the kind of apps that they want to build, all in Azure, all through app services, all generally data entry, data processing, that keep the logic on the device and send the data up. So we've got, quite a niche skill set there, but then, naturally we pick up some of the more popular frameworks like React Native and on obviously native apps as well.
Yeah, it's I'm a little bit jealous of that choice because my background's .NET
Oh,
and I'd
great.
code everything in C# if I had a choice.
Yeah.
But the tech ecosystem earlier doors in the mobile world, and you'll know this, didn't really favour. Xamarin never was a strong player when it came to consumer-oriented apps particularly. And so we did it the other way, and we started doing iOS, and then that matured to Android, and we did a bit of Windows in the meantime.
Brilliant.
And if those that don't know, that died away, and Microsoft embraced Android as well, but they have obviously their cross-platform tech that you support. But we've done the opposite. Instead of keeping that broad brush approach, we've actually honed our skills purely into the JavaScript and TypeScript stack.
Right.
So we've created our own product base called the Core, which our front end is all React Native, as you sort of mentioned earlier. It's become one of the most popular. And then our back end services and our CMS and content management systems are all utilizing JavaScript or TypeScript so that we have more ubiquitous skill sets around our devs. And then if our customers ever want to take that in-house, they're only employing one technical skill, even though they may have slightly more niche personal skills. Those individuals, they're always focused on one technology, and that's just made life a lot easier from us. So our headspace only needs to be around JavaScript and TypeScript essentially, which makes our life a lot easier. So when we're designing new projects, we know exactly what that ecosystem looks like. We utilize our technology to get us 20-30% way into that project with modules and features that are already pre-built or robust and used in another project before that. So
Interesting. And tell me a bit about your typical customers then. Are they startup, scale-ups or established businesses?
So over the time, that's changed a lot, and we've actually been debating this quite a lot as we go through a rebrand process. But no, we're moving more away from the sort of startup space into the more scale-ups, and then sort of the larger SMEs and enterprises that are utilising an app as part of generally their consumer product and service, or their customer product and service, not necessarily consumer. We do quite a bit of work for B2B or B2B to C, and that app is then part of their product, part of their service, but their business is actually bigger than that, and it does other things. And so the app, it's not a startup that is all they are about. But we have done quite a bit of work for startups in the past, and it's a different way for working than the way we're generally set up for. They obviously are quite cost conscious.
Yes.
Being UK based, we don't quite provide that same sort of price break which other offshore companies, as I'm sure you're well aware, can provide.
Yeah,
to compete with, right?
It's interesting. A lot of our work is recovering projects that have gone out there.
Well,
so
that's the problem.
You and I have a vested interest in this debate, don't we?
Yeah,
But
exactly.
we only see the failed projects, I think it's fair to say, because they come back to us as we've outsourced this. It's not fit for purpose. Can you take? And it's a real challenge for us.
And that's a real difference of where your business and our business is follow, because we didn't want that sort of risk. Taking on someone else's code, you just have no idea what you're going to uncover. You could do the best audit in the world, and still there's one little library that you haven't accounted for, and it could cause all sorts of headaches. So how do you guys manage that sort of risk?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the main way is being upfront with the customer on the outset and choosing the right customers, which is a very privileged thing to be able to say, but you need to be able to sit across the table from someone and make sure they understand that we aren't buying all of the risk in this relationship. And, we can audit and check exactly as you've said, but there will be unknowns, and we need to talk upfront about what happens when we find those unknowns. Is there a contingency pool? Do we reduce feature set? How do we deal with that as and when we uncover? And we've got, much like you talked about your design process, we've got a reasonably robust process now around that rebuild or refactor decision, which needs to happen first. And, there's there's more than just code quality to consider there. You need to understand the future roadmap. You need to understand, yes, the code quality, but also the data quality, the sort of CI environment around the development.
I imagine just that handover from
Well, it
whoever
can be
was there
mixed.
before.
Yeah, exactly.
There's obviously a lot of tension at some point with them and their previous.
There can be, yeah.
incumbent,
We've
and-
generally found actually people in the business are quite professional. I can't think of a time we've had a really unprofessional handover. But you're right.
all those dependencies and everything. It just gets a bit messy.
It can be challenging,
sometimes, but-
definitely. But it's the beauty for us is we can often get in. Sometimes we'll be competing with agencies that are offering new builds, and clearly we're willing to adopt and adapt on a monthly budget as opposed to a big lump sum investment. For some customers, that's appealing to them, and so we can get in that way. And then in the future, there may be a rebuild. But it has its challenges.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is the sort of stuff that Tom, our account manager, tries to pick up at those early calls, because whilst we're in business to make money like everyone else is, we want the right customers like you do. And when a customer comes to us and we think the best bet is not to chuck loads of money at rebuilding everything, we'll always recommend and sort of refer them to the likes of yourselves to make sure that they get the value of their investment as soon as they can, rather than just spending money on churning the same thing out again, but better. It's not always the right decision. And that goes deep into the back end as well as the front end, right? Integration with what they existing have can be just as much painful as building a new back end system. So
let me ask you, one of the benefits of our model is that we're generally retained by clients to evolve over time. One of the challenges we had early doors when we were project based was the sort of new business cycle of having to find new business to feed the machine. I'm always interested when I speak to agencies like yourselves that focus on the new build stuff. How do you balance the books effectively?
It's tough getting pricing for apps, and any software development is difficult, because you either have to take a very agile approach and work on t-shirt sizes and guesstimates, and again, going back to your point about balancing risk, you're off shelving some of that with the customers, but a lot of customers want a budget, they want a fixed price, they want a time scale. And so we've defined our process very specifically to give us the best balance of giving the customers cost control, whereas offsetting some of that risk, and then give them flexibility going forward. So we start by working on discovery based upon a time and expenses model. So we work through the design and the planning for the project with a rough idea of the budget for that, in order to then, at the end of that process, be confident that we can give them a fixed price. So we'll work on an initial MVP type delivery cycle. And at the end, we have a fixed project price, a fixed schedule. So therefore, we can show that the project's completed on time and on budget. But then we encourage more retained support, maintenance, development model after that, depending on customers' appetite as well. Because we never quite know how much they'll then invest, because we often find that once we've built a successful project, that gets demonstrated to wider stakeholders in the business, and suddenly more budgets can be found, and then the app becomes a much more important asset in their business. So that becomes then a long-term ongoing relationship, and we're doing continuous iteration, phase after phase. But we still work a bit more ad hoc in terms of some clients who don't want to invest that permanent retainer in maintenance, because their app is a part of their model, but not as part of their day-to-day business. And I think seasonal changes might be more common than monthly cycles. So.
I think that key insight of yours that you made earlier around, if the app is the core product, then outsourcing to an agency probably isn't the right solution for anyone, is it? The client wants to build those teams internally. So almost by definition, our customers are usually not app agencies. In our case, they're often technical departments. And one of my questions was going to be who your typical customers is within a business. It feels to me like most agencies are used to selling into marketing departments or customer support departments, whereas typically our customer is a CTO or a CIO.
Interesting, yeah. We find the people we're mainly speaking to, because the businesses are generally probably a bit bigger or a bit more mature maybe, I'm not sure. We're generally talking mainly product owners, product managers, those people that actually have full responsibility for looking after that product within their business. Obviously, we end up talking to the CTOs and the other developers in the teams, but they don't tend to be our first point of contact on a day-to-day basis. So when our guys have our weekly calls, it's generally more product managers, owners, that the main point of contact for us, and then those calls get joined by more technical people along the way. And
are they the ones making the decisions to appoint, or?
They generally are the voice. They're obviously referring back to stakeholders in many cases, but they generally do have quite a lot of clout in so on a call, we might say 10 decisions. They might be able to make half of them on the call, because they're little things about words or color or a logo or an icon. Whereas then the functional stuff, all the discovery part, we try and involve the wider stakeholders to make sure that the app we're building is focused purely on the business goals as well as the user goals, rather than just what some team have come up with in the background during a meeting one time. So,
I mean that's really interesting. I'm just reflecting on one of your earlier points that we experience a lot dealing with technical teams, is having to hand an app back into a company or run in parallel with an internal development team. And you mentioned obviously being JavaScript top to bottom, it can be easier for your customers to pick that up in-house if they need to hire. Is that, we do a lot of that in-house collaboration, taking off, doing work hand in back. Is that something that happens in your world too?
We've done a lot of that. We've actually done more of that as we've moved as a business. So we've moved from being native as well as cross-platform, and so we've handed over quite a few projects to partner companies like yourselves to then maintain, because they're more suited from a tech stack perspective. But we have generally a 3-month process that we work through during that cycle, onboarding their teams, educating them, teaching them about the structure of the code base, everything else. Then what we typically would suggest, they start doing the maintenance, little bug fixes, things like that during that process, while we'll continue feature development until they find, and then they have an allocation of time to talk to our tech teams on a regular basis. And then we eventually will hand over full control rather than shared control over that project once their teams are upskilled and feel confident more than anything. And we'll still probably do ad hoc work. So we did this with a client a few years ago. They finally got the investment through their internal team. We did that initial sort of 3-month phase, but they actually, whilst we were still doing that, ended up booking another 2 major feature changes.
Wow, yeah.
So we carried on working for them for about 6 to 9 months on big features, whilst their team really did hone their skills and understand. Because again, most cases, the people you're handing over to aren't necessarily have the experience in the tech stack.
No.
They're often pivoting from web development or whatever it might be. And so they've got a technology to learn, not just the code, which is more a syntax.
And presumably we've had great success in having our guys continue to code review and pull requests and all that kind of stuff around the internal developers' work, just to offer insight and so on. So it's nice to hear that's something. But
I imagine you become a much more of fixtures and fittings.
Yes, yeah. So we're typically with our customers. I wouldn't know the average, but it'll be 3 to 4 years, something like that. Because we're just retained to keep the lights on. And I think where we lack the glamour and excitement of nice, big, new, sexy build projects, there's a reassurance to the fact that, if our app fails, their business fails. So they need to, invest in, and there's a recognition for the company that they need to keep investing.
But I imagine your clients have to appreciate the amount you guys have got to learn about their own code base. You guys really have to take that in-house and own it, because unlike ours, all of our projects have a similar structure. Our files are laid out the same.
Yes.
Our deployment cycles are the same. Yours, you're working with lots of different technologies, and you've no idea what.
Yeah, and we do try to sort of homologate certainly the processes. So, 2-week builds or 2-week release or whatever that is.
Yeah.
We try and do that. But you're right. It's things like when one of our developers needs to go on holiday, it sounds daft, but it's not as easy as when all the developers can pick up any projects. We have to work really hard to make sure we're transferring skills across the team.
Yeah, it must be really challenging.
Silo.
That's exactly why we're trying to keep it simple for ourselves.
Yeah. I think you either do one or the other, because it's very easy to end up with, Tom does all of the work on that project. Tom's now left the business, and now everyone's stuck. So we have to work quite hard. We have a bit of a matrix, you can imagine, with who's competent at what. But it's also interesting that quite often, the projects that begin as a refactor, evolution, patching up, will result eventually in a sort of more of a CapEx style rebuild. And at that point, we can bring everything onto, if it's Xamarin, or generally it's Xamarin or React Native now for us.
We obviously both have a mutual need to support our customers long term, and not just maintenance, but we've both been in there since early days of the mobile app game, and I'm sure we'll both admit that that's changed vastly. Yes. When people wonder about industry and learning how from the past, we don't have a lot of past to go off when our industry's only been around for 14, 15 years. But our space is ever changing, and especially with Apple's events last week, where there's huge amounts of change, and Google's the same. How do you guys try and stay on top of that changing technology and then advise your customers on it?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think because we're typically building apps not for consumers, we're a little less on the bleeding edge. You know, our customers aren't asking us generally about XR or blockchain. Our customers are asking us, can we get this data cached properly?
Yeah.
And it's a different set of circumstances and problems. High availability, lots of redundancy, lots of complex integrations, but really known challenges in software development. So I think we're quite lucky in that we get to sidestep some of that. You know, that said, for our own edification and for the enjoyment of our or for the development of our staff, you know, clearly we need to stay at least 2 steps ahead of our clients. And so we do spend a fair bit of time doing that, and particularly actually more around the tooling. And I think, you know, you alluded to changes in the mobile ecosystem. The big changes over the past 3 or 4 years for me have been less around the sort of SDK framework level stuff that Apple and Google are shipping, and more around the ecosystem that's available to us as developers.
CI/CD, test processes,
all of that, Firebase, all that stuff. And actually, that's really of interest to our clients. Okay, and how can we be quicker? How can we measure more accurately? How can we get data back into the business? They're the areas that we're finding our customers are really interested in.
Yeah, it's interesting. We just started using a new testing tool, which got some AI built into it. And we're trying to build that cycle where apps get pushed through into staging build. They go straight into App Center to be released to customers, but at the same time, they're getting tested through this new system and feedback straight to us, so we can reduce manual smoke testing and things like that. Whilst it's a good investment, this piece of software, the amount of man hours we're going to save should hopefully really pay dividends in the long term.
Yeah.
So we don't have to continue to build out the test team. We are using software to fix some of it, but it's the boring part.
Yeah, the bits they don't want to be doing.
It's not right. We're going to really try and make sure this breaks before to get the feedback.
Yeah.
The software will just go.
Run
you haven't broken anything. Any recurring issue that you've introduced. So
and testing's a really interesting one. So we've been and are still big advocates of manual smoke testing, as you describe. But when I reflect on why that is, a lot of our applications, because again they're not consumer facing sort of UI onto API stuff, they're using things like Bluetooth for data transfer or telematics or location services, or it's hard
you can't automate that.
No, so like one of our big clients is a telematics car insurance. We have to put people in cars and drive them on a 5-mile loop. You can't replicate that.
Because Tesla will solve that for you, right?
Well, that's what I'm picking up in a few hours, but that's a different story. But that's during lockdown we had to get permits from the police to allow us to keep driving around in circles because you just we
had a similar problem during the pandemic in that we were doing a lot of work for Eurotunnel at the time, and one of the features is GPS and tracking people getting to the site and moving around the site, but we couldn't even go there. So we had to fake an equivalent site around York that our team could then walk around to match the same technology.
Fantastic.
But it's fun challenges. People have no idea what we have to do sometimes.
Absolutely. But testing is a really interesting one. It's something we keep our eyes on because, as I mentioned, high availability, that is something that's critical to our customers. That the sort of fail fast, iterate quick doesn't work in their
when you
environment.
deployed an app like I imagine you do to a team of dozens and hundreds of people that are using it day in, day out, if it fails, that's a lot of downtime for a company.
It is. So we've got to be quite systematic and process driven in our
so because our stuff is a bit more consumer oriented, we have that challenge, but instead of it costing people a lot of money and downtime, people become very vocal. And it becomes reviews on the app stores, and we have to be very, very careful when we're doing releases, especially big changes, to try and mitigate any concerns and double account for what they might do, because you just consumers do all sorts of random things.
Yeah. That's
you have
true.
to try and second guess what random behavior they might do to work out why a bug might occur, but they might not go the logical route that we've thought through.
Yeah, absolutely.
The happy path, as we call it, isn't always the way through an app that the same user applies.
Yeah.
So going back to the support piece, one thing we found useful to do is, whilst we'll do a coverage of a big event on our blog, as the features functionality come out over the next few months, we'll tend to highlight them in our blog. So, for example, Apple insists now that people can delete their accounts. So that was obviously a big deal for all of us, and luckily it got extended and last year. But Tom himself put a blog together, and then he's able to share that with our customers as part of that sort of account management routine. So we can highlight these changes, recommend them to our customers so they go into the next cycle of change, or for those ad hoc clients, we need to build them into the next audit we do to make, as well as just the maintenance. It's general, the apps will get rejected, right? And we've got some big security changes coming in iOS 17 that we're going to try and make sure we've got good clarity and run rate against to make sure that our customers don't get caught out.
So, conscious the conversation might be getting a little bit development focused. I've been nudged by my glamorous assistant to try and...
It's our natural
we're just resorting to the side. Yeah, I think maybe we look back to where we started. We you and I both started businesses 14 years ago for yourself. I think 12 for me. What drove that decision for you? And I'm interested to learn, how's that bled through, and what remains of those initial...
That's a really good question. So when I was younger, I was always a little bit entrepreneurial, using technology to solve problems for people. I was probably the first people in the street to have access to a computer, so I'd print off menus and flyers for neighbours for this event or their sandwich van, whatever it is. And I always found that fascinating for me, that problem-solving aspect. And that carried on throughout uni, everything. I've always had let's call it a side hustle these days of working for myself, never feeling I was entrepreneurial, but my parents and other girlfriends in the past thought that I was always going to run a business, but it wasn't my dream. That wasn't my goal. Yet went through university, 6 years in a career, and yet my side hustle was starting to overtake my full-time job, and finally I had to break. And so I stepped out as a web developer. Quickly that moved into app development when one of the customers needed some app development work, and I happened to have built a prototype for them already. And that I never really thought about running an agency or running a bigger business, but as the demand from the customers grew, I found that I had a good voice for talking to them, communicating them, and so I had to get the odd bit of help here and there to fill in gaps, extra technical resource mainly, and that anxiety about giving up some control that my mum always thought I'd be terrible at disappeared very quickly when I found that the people I hired were much better at coding than me. And then that grew, much better designers than me and much better project managers than me. And suddenly I had a business partner with similar values to me. And 3-4 years later, we had a team of 15 filled with experts, all better at their jobs than I am. And I was kind of more governing that team. And I was still the voice of the company, talking to the customers. And that's now even moved on today with the likes of Tom, who's our main point of contact from outside customer facing stuff, and then the projects team look after the day-to-day running of things with the customers. So
and how have you maintained the culture as you've grown from just you and then you and one other to...
So once I realized I was on the path to setting up an agency, my heart of where I loved working before I stepped out was with one particular company I worked for, a company called Think, and we had a great culture. We had a beautiful office, the top floor of an old mill, wooden floors, all the cool tech. Yeah, a bit like the building we're in today, you're right. But we had a great culture. We were out 2 nights a week, the team, we were a similar age, similar aspirations, and we loved working together. So I always hark back to that, to think that's what we want. So culture has always been key. The staff are the company's best resource. So if we don't focus on them, their well-being, their growth, everything, we're not going to win at business. And I think that's what's enabled us to still be 15 years in soon, or in June, this month, in fact. And proud to have a team that we've had so much support for the ups and downs of the last decade or so. With that team have been continually supporting the business's growth as well as us supporting them. And one of the proudest moments for me is people getting mortgages. Like the fact that they're working for our business and had been able to get that support to to invest in their own lives, I'm very proud of. What about yourself? Because
it's interesting. Not too dissimilar. So I was very similar to yourself, except I always wanted to make games. So Commodore 64, my first basic program was a combat spaceship thing. Nice. Where you had to shoot aliens. But yeah, went to uni, did geography because I'd found it easiest at A level. I think I attended something like 20 lectures over the 3 years. But I did buy myself a Mac Mini and taught myself to code.
Wow.
With Talk Game Builder at the time.
That's what I was shooting loans before, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I got PlayStation, new car stereo.
Yeah, exactly. Couldn't afford anything but a pot noodle, but I did have a Mac Mini. And then went to work at an agency as a coder, but I think they worked out pretty quickly I was a terrible coder, so they moved me to account management, moved from them to a software company, but by then I'd been moonlighting for a company, made the jump. And for me, it was that first year of contracting was just so liberating to be, I can work when I want, I can work how I want. We just got a house with my fiance then, now wife. And the impetus for me, it was a bit like you, got more work than I could handle, hired a few people, originally hired contractors around the world. So we had someone in every continent at one point.
I had
which
a team
was really
of Russians
cool.
at one point,
And delivering it. And then I thought, well, hang on, why don't we bring this in-house? And hired my friends. So the initial 3 or 4, my first employee was my brother, and the next 3 or 4 were friends. So you can imagine the culture we had back then.
Yeah.
That we sort of supported them to teach them to code, brought the coding in-house. Grew from there. And then the mission ever since then really has been to grow the company with our original client, who's still our most important, but then grow the other side of the business. Yeah. And our culture has always been focused on how can we bring the freedom of being a contractor with the security of being an employee that a lot of people are more comfortable with. And so that was, for instance, flexible working. It's a big term now. But
that's a big subject.
Yeah, but, from day one, we were 2 days in the office, 3 at home to try and balance that.
Yeah, interesting. So I've had my views changed, I guess.
Okay,
so I was quite against remote and hybrid working. I thought our team's cultural values, the collaborative nature, everything was best done in the office, and it's where we could vibe and everything else together. But the pandemic forced our hand on that one, whether we liked it or not. We did come back 3 days a week, and that was great. And we're doing more and more. But even during that process, we had to learn different ways of previously your culture just was osmosis to the other members of the team you were sat next to.
Yeah.
Remotely, that doesn't work. So we've had to change a lot as a business, I was still reluctant. Pandemic round 3, whatever it was, lockdown round 3, I wanted to come back 3 days a week, and I sort of announced that to the team. That's what was my plan. By 5 o'clock that same day, I was told I was wrong, and we're now a fully hybrid company.
Oh, wow.
and our MD, she thinks it's probably the best thing we've ever done from a cultural perspective. It gives people so much more flexibility. Strangely, we have now got the whole team are within commutable distance of the office, even though during the pandemic they were scattered around Europe.
We've had the same.
One point.
Yeah.
And so company catch up tomorrow, there's a good chance everyone's going to be in the office.
Yes.
And we'll go to the pub and everything else. So
it's interesting. Everyone's gone on a different journey, haven't they? Because when we started, we were fully remote. Then we were hybrid. Then obviously lockdown went back to fully remote. We sort of come back to where we were with that. But it is challenging. But what I have noticed is all the employees that we hired during the lockdown period have since moved on.
Interesting.
Whereas in our first 8 years, only one person left the business. And it was a real culture shock to me to have...
That's some great
retention
rates.
8 years, one person, and then in 2 years, 3 or 4 that we hired and left. Yeah. And I attribute that directly to not being in the office, not having never feeling like you're part of the team.
Yeah, see, I think...
Which is probably...
I could totally get that challenge, and that's what we had to learn fast, how we try and instill it. Half our team's in the office in the morning, and half the team are remote. So for those running Scrum, it's hard because everyone's behind a microphone that's on mute, right? Rather than being there to have the... So it's really tough getting that cultural fix right. And people say there's software to do it all, but it's still nothing like that in-person stuff.
No, I don't think so.
I'm glad that we've got this mix rather than it being fully hybrid. But like you probably start business a few years later than me. Internet was faster by a great speed. So not everyone had internet at home when we started
absolutely.
business.
When I was at uni, I taught myself to code by working fully remotely on mods for Unreal Tournament, so Counter-Strike and Tactical Ops and stuff like that. So we were doing fully remote. People, it was all students around Europe and America, basically just working on software. And so that was 2005 to 8.
Yeah, exactly. So that's when I was in employment, and I worked for 6 agencies over the course of about 6 years, but they were all office based.
Yeah.
We didn't have remote workers at all.
No,
so
we didn't.
I didn't have that exposure to how flexible that could be. We used contractors every now and then, but they all had to work in-house as well. I think the companies now that have started in a remote or hybrid world have been able to embrace it better than us that have had to transition, because we haven't had this mix of employees and cultural
and
aspects.
change.
So it's been a challenge for everybody that's moved to it, but I think it's really good for everybody in the long term.
Oh, definitely.
Despite my more dinosaur views of the subject matter.
And what are your plans, Anthony, for the business over the next few years then? We've had a turbulent previous 3 or 4 years. What are you looking at the horizon and seeing?
As a company, we're changing quite significantly. So you may have seen in the press that I've stepped away from the MD role. We've kind of calling this phase internally as moving from lifestyle to performance business. So the business has run under my governance for the last 14 years, but comes with all my baggage and my opinions, my heart and soul's in it. And as the business grows, it can't all be held back by me. So Louise, who's been supporting me for the last 5 years and really key role at head of ops, has now taken over as MD. And she's got the capacity to really drive us forward with a great supportive team behind her. So we will see more growth for the first time in about 4 years. We kind of stabilized or plateaued, but we're not aiming to be some huge monolith of an agency. We still want the cultural values, so we need to do that carefully and at a pace that we're comfortable with, because we've grown in the past, and growth creates hurdles for yourself as processes and things have to change. So we are looking for quite an exciting growth period now as a business.
Great, that's exciting.
What about yourselves? You obviously talked about 2 sides of the business now. Is that a big part of it?
So yes, we have got 2 sides. So the side we've been talking about, the mobile app side that focuses on in-house apps and rebuilds, but the other side of our business is more in the gaming space. You draw that line right back to that original client. So they're actually exploring the XR side of things and the more that cutting edge stuff. So last week's announcement's obviously very exciting. Our goal really is to keep on the trajectory that we've been on, which is modest growth, but not, sometimes you look at these tech superstars and you think, how on earth do you keep up
You mean
with...
jealousy, yeah?
Oh, yeah, a little bit of that.
As owners, that's what we've got,
more incredulity at how they do it.
Yeah.
Like, how do you hire that many people? And
It's mad, some of them.
Wow.
I remember sitting over an awards dinner, and I was chatting to the guy at Launder App, and they'd been going 4 years, or was it even less than that, and he said they had 400 employees.
Yeah.
I was like, how can you make enough decisions in a business to get to the point where you have 400
and
employees?
And not have it all just spin out. Yeah, I find it...
different type of skills.
It is different type of skills,
skills,
and it's different types of problems. But I'm in awe of the business owners that can do that kind of acceleration. So no, we're far more modest than that. So double-digit growth, but just keep it at that pace and just find our feet each step.
Yeah, I imagine gaming is a very different idea. We call ourselves utilitarian app developers because it's all about function, like yourself.
Yes.
It's about delivering that utility, that requirement for day-to-day usage and engagement, rather than more entertainment-oriented like gaming. And we've always held away from that because we don't have those sort of audio artists and illustrators and a whole nother wide world of skills that, again, we've tried to hone our skills down to a polished set of processes, whereas you guys, that must be a lot easier probably, knowing the makeup of your business already is quite diverse.
Yeah, well, it's interesting you say that, because actually for the XR stuff, the angle we're going at is XR for businesses. So how can we deliver real world value? So an example of a client that we're working with at the moment does remote boiler repair. So to avoid having to send out an engineer to fix a pilot light that's gone out or an error code, can we use the phone? Can we draw on the device? It's very simple AR techniques. reduces first time call out. At the very least means if they go, they already know what make and model boiler they're dealing with and what parts they need to bring. So we're trying to sort of blend the two. We're not, as we've discussed, we're not into the metaverse branded XR Adidas trainers. That's as far from us as you can get. But can we connect a contact center with a video stream, with the ability to draw and impose that's more our.
I imagine you've got two big challenges there. One is training the staff to use that technology, which people are Luddites sometimes, and that's just a digital transformation process. But getting the customers involved and the education around using this sort of stuff, I imagine it's going to be quite a challenge.
Yeah, and that's where you come back to the usability piece, isn't it? And the classic hurdle of how do you get a customer on a phone to download an app, install it, log in, and exactly. But they're people problems.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's our angle with XR is to try and stay away from the sexy
Sounds
stuff.
really cool.
Yeah. Well, I'll let you know. We'll come back in a year's
when you
time
change your mind.
I'll tell you how that worked out. Yeah, maybe we should have done some Adidas trainers.
We were talking about culture being a big aspect of both of our businesses. We're going through a rebrand process, and it's challenging, let's to say the least, for us. We're just about got some draft mission and values defined. How have you gone about that as part of the business? Has that changed much over time?
Yeah, great question. So I was always against printed values on the wall. My view was values are how you act and what you do, not what you write upon the wall. And it was COVID in the same way for yourself with the hybrid working that shifted that, and it made me realize, well, we've clearly changed, and I need to be able to articulate. We need to be able to articulate to ourselves and to new employees what it is about our business and how we like to do things. So we actually engaged in I don't know if you're aware, the Entrepreneurs Operating System.
Yeah, I am actually. Yeah, EOS. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So we sort of jumped into that, I suppose, and you'll know one of the first things you do there is the VTO, and part of that is your values and focus and so on. And what I really liked about that, what resonated with me, was the differentiation of niche and purpose as your focus or mission. And so one of the challenges that I've always had is the purpose of our business is to enrich our employees' lives. It's not actually focused on the technology and the apps. It's not even, don't listen to this, not focused on the customers. For me, the important bit is around the staff, and can we give them that freedom of life and quality of life that I was able to achieve as a freelancer. And so, but most systems don't allow for that. Your purpose has to be a big hairy goal, or has to be, we want to make the world's biggest app company or the sexiest apps or make our customers really happy. Whereas our purpose is to enable our team members to live their best lives, but our niche is solving our clients' problems through simplifying mobile tech. And so I really like that. And then we went on to the values bit, and we codified our values to try and help us hire the right people and almost justify to ourselves why we were set up like we were set up previously as regards to how we worked and so on. So yeah, we found 4, and then a year later added another in, which I think do quite accurately reflect who we are as a business. Yeah. How about yourself?
Yeah, so we haven't had any for the first probably decade of the business. I guess I kind of ran on a purpose of creating a place where everyone wants to be and nobody wants to leave from both a customer and employee perspective. But it was always an unwritten line other than in my head. And we did some values work about a year ago with the team. And we came up with 3. We said we were empowered creative experts. And on reflection, I looked back on that and I was like, actually, that is the sort of vision I always had for the business. And we've now matured that a little bit. We say we empower success. We are passionate experts. We are creative problem solvers, and we enjoy the journey. And these we've only come about in the last few weeks, so we're still starting to work out how we're going to introduce them. But our previous ones, in all of our one-to-ones and our team meetings, we ask the question of how we relate to these terms, because, like you say, that pandemic really shifted in the ability for us to share cultural values. And so we need to kind of keep using those as tools. And as I've gone through this journey, I've reached out to friends and colleagues and asked them how they use values in their company. And it's interesting to see that some of them, they'll use their values as part of their sales process or their general customer engagement process to say, we are this, that's why we do this and why it's important to you. And we'll probably start to integrate that across there too.
We need to do a better job of that.
Yeah, I mean, as you say, these things can easily fall by the wayside, but it's been a big focus for us as part of this rebrand, so that when it comes to our next marketing strategy and the brand creative, and even just how we hold ourselves accountable to our customers, we have some guidance for every member of the staff. So a new member of staff joins us, they can at least say what attributes of their day-to-day decision-making are important, and therefore use them as a framework to guide their decisions when they won't be sat next to somebody, or a Slack message will go unread for a few hours. They can at least think that they've got some guidance without actually having personal support sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you mentioned there feeding these values into your rebrand. Can you share a little bit about what that rebrand is and when we can expect to see something?
Well, yeah, we've gone around in circles a little bit. We were hoping to have it all done by Easter, but we're still only probably about a third of the way through the new process. And yeah, it's really interesting. We've got we've actually lent on a previous customer of ours who's spun out now as a new business, and she's actually supporting us through that process. But as a team, it's getting us to really reflect on who we are as a business and why we do what we do, and exactly for the reason we're talking about, the differences in our business. It's helping us to hone that further, be sure about where we sit, exactly where that niche is, and how far into a niche we want to focus, exactly understanding who our customers are, so that we can continue to build our own product and our own processes around more specific types of service that we can deliver, rather than trying to be too big and too wide and too open. It allows us to deliver the best value that we can, both to our team as well, because it's consistency. They can continue to hone their skills in particular areas, rather than trying to be massively broad brush and trying to deliver everything all at once.
Yeah, so. Fantastic.
But at some point, I will have some more creative and a new website. But it seems they're the two things that are last on the list.
Yeah.
The sexy part is right down the line. But yeah, we look forward to it.
If not by Easter, by Christmas.
Well, let's hope so. But we will watch Grand Designs. We'll be Easter next year probably.
Absolutely.
But I hope not. Our support is very regimented at getting our stuff done. So
fantastic.
Holding us to account, which is great.
Brilliant. Well, Anthony, listen, it's been great having a chat. It's definitely worth the trip over the Pennines on the M62, which you hear so much about, and it's always a pleasure to experience. It's been really interesting. Thank you. It's been genuinely
fascinating.
Privilege to hear about how your business and how you've gone about things. And
it's funny how different yet so similar.
Yeah, absolutely.
Both our businesses are.
Yeah.
It's great that the mobile industry is so big and broad that there's so much space for us to support each other and work together on a lot of stuff.
Yeah. Well, again, thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
That's great.
Appreciate it. Cheers.
Bye.
Thanks to both Anthony and Rob for their time today and talking us through the nitty-gritty of their businesses and how two mobile app agencies can work in two very different ways. Hopefully this talk has been useful for both other agency owners and businesses who are considering building an app, or who have their own mobile application already. If this has been useful, do let us know, and if we're able to provide value by hosting these kinds of conversations, we'd absolutely consider making more in the future. Most of all though, thanks for joining us. If you are looking for a new build app, contact The Distance on hello@thedistance.co.uk. And if you want your existing app headaches solving, then reach out to Indiespring on hello@indiespring.com.